Welcome everyone. We're going to just allow just a few minutes for people to join. I know that there are almost always some internet and challenging opportunities associated with this. So just be patient with us. We want to make certain that we have an opportunity to welcome everyone. So we will start the webinar here shortly. If you've just joined us, just a few minutes here for our participants to join. So give us just a few moments and we will begin. Okay, just another couple of minutes and we will begin. Okay, we're 3 minutes past the hour and I want to be respectful of your time. So we'd like to begin with welcome to the Bradford Island Cleanup Public Meeting. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Lisa Wells, the Deputy District Engineer for Programs and Project Management and the Senior Civilian for the Portland District. She has been the district's Deputy Engineer since May of 2021. In this position, Liza provides district leadership in establishing and maintaining processes to manage the scope, quality, cost, budget, and schedules of all district projects. She oversees and directs all civil works programs management activities, including program and budget development, preparation for congressional testimony, oversight of program execution, and reprogramming actions. Further, she is responsible for all civil works planning for the district, including plan formation, economics, and environmental resources. Liz began her service with the Portland District in September 2009 as a hydraulic engineer in the hydraulic design section. Please help me in Liza Wells.
Thanks, Linda. Can you confirm that you can hear me? Great.
I've got
Thank you. Good, thank you. Well, hi, everyone. Good evening. I want to welcome everyone to this meeting tonight as we reintroduce Bradford Island to the public in our first public meeting since EPA listed the site on the national priorities list. And we understand that there wasn't much notice about this public meeting, but we were really eager to reach out to the public quickly to start the public engagement process and reintroduce the project to folks that may not be as familiar with the work that's been going on at the site. The Corps of Engineers has retained Balcom Environmental Services. They are public involvement specialists to facilitate today's public meeting and to implement our community involvement plan moving ahead. There will be many more public meetings in the future, and those will give you opportunities for public engagement in the CERCLA process as we move forward. Since discovery of contaminants at Bradford Island, the Corps of Engineers has been committed to cleaning up the site. And as the lead federal agency, we have a responsibility to clean up Bradford Island and we will follow the established and systematic CERCLA process while holding to our own environmental operating principles. We're looking forward to working closely with EPA, as well as Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, Washington Department of Ecology, the tribes, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, among others. Public engagement is really a key component of the investigation and cleanup process. And we very much encourage the public's participation in meetings like this and to get involved in the process. So thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day today to attend this meeting. And we really look forward to hearing from you and learning about your thoughts and concerns and issues. And we encourage you to participate in the public process moving forward. And you'll hear more about how to sign up for an interview at the end of the month with our community involvement contractor. I'd like to now turn things back to our contractor, Linda Balcom, to begin the presentation and help facilitate the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. That was lovely. So let's review real quick what we're going to review. So as you can see on our agenda here, we have our welcome. We will then roll into introductions. There will be introductions from both the Corps of Engineers as well as from EPA. And then EPA will then provide a review of the national priorities list for the Bradford Island site. Corps of Engineers will review the background and the CERCLA process and work to date. And then that will then transfer to a discussion about the community involvement and our next steps. At the very end, there will be a question and answer period. So briefly, let's review. If you're attending via Zoom, there is a bubble at the bottom of your diagram, at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A. Please type in your questions there, and we will answer as many of those as we can as part of our Q&A process. If you are dialing in via phone, or if you do not want to ask a question at this time, but you think later, here is the perfect email address for those questions. It is Bradford Island Public Comment Inbox at usace.army.mil. And again, if anybody has joined us via phone, again, that is Bradford Island Public Comment Inbox at usace.army.mil. And of course, if you include your contact information, you will receive notifications regarding the Bradford site and including opportunities for public participation. So with that, I would like, actually, real quick. So we have a very, I would really appreciate some feedback. So what you will see on your screen here is a poll, and we would really appreciate everybody who would like to contribute and answer our questions as part of this process. This is, of course, all helpful as part of our public involvement program. So with that, I would like to hand this over to Chris Badai, who is the Bradford Island Project Manager.
Chris, I think you're still on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. My name is Chris Badai, and I am the project manager for this project, Bradford Island CERCLA Cleanup. I've been with the Corps, Portland District, for 37 years, and I've worked many projects, some of which have been CERCLA projects, including in the Portland Superfund site. The Portland Harbor Superfund site. So I welcome everyone, look forward to a good discussion. Dan?
Hi everyone, my name is Dan Carlson. I'm an environmental scientist and I've been with the Army Corps of Engineers for about 3 years. Prior to the Corps, I had 10 years of experience in environmental consulting with characterizing and remediating contaminated sites. Part of that consulting experience included supporting the EPA with discovering and investigating Superfund sites. And I currently act as the Army Corps technical lead for Bradford Island by coordinating work and helping to complete technical work across the project. And I'll pass it off to you, John.
I think
John, you
Dan
might be on.
I think John's gonna be joining us later. I think you want to introduce Kristen.
I'm here. Sorry, I just double muted. Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Great. Again, I'll start again. My name is John Morgan. I'm a public affairs specialist. I've been with the Army Corps of Engineers for 2 years now. I served as a public affairs officer for 15 years while I was in the Army. I'm currently working as the district's on the media relations team, and I also manage the district's Twitter feed. I support the project's public affairs needs, and will be one of the key interfaces between our community involvement coordinator and our contractors. I will be followed by Kristen.
Hi, this is Kristen Kearns. I'm a risk assessor with 14 years of experience with the Corps of Engineers, and I provide technical support to the Bradford Island project.
Hi, this is Bill Gardner. I'm a risk assessor, toxicologist, and aquatic biologist working for the Seattle District at the Corps of Engineers. I've been with the Seattle District for 5 years and have over 32 years of experience in understanding contaminants in the environment. And during that time, I've worked with the Army Corps of Engineers, EPA, state governments, Northwest tribes, and private companies to characterize chemical contamination at sites, to understand the potential for human and ecological effects of the contamination, and to develop plans for remediation and restoration. And Craig. I think Craig may be having some technical difficulties, so maybe Missy, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you. Good evening. My name is Missy Mcbain, and I am an environmental specialist with the Army Corps of Engineers Portland District. And I have been with the Corps for 10 years. In my role as an environmental compliance coordinator at Bonneville Dam, I am responsible for implementing environmental programs and performing environmental compliance management for the facility. And I am the local on-site coordinator for the Bradford Island project.
Thanks, everybody. And at this time, I'd like to introduce the team from EPA. So, Laura?
Thanks so much, Linda. And we actually have a few, I think, introductory remarks too. So we'll go ahead and provide those. And thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Laura Knudsen, and I'm a community involvement coordinator with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And I am pictured in the middle of this slide on your screen. And I have supported community involvement work at other Superfund sites, including Portland Harbor. And tonight I'm joined by the other two people on this slide, our EPA technical experts or remedial project managers, or PMs, Helen Bocher and Richard Francis, and they'll just introduce themselves really quickly in a moment. But we just want to say we're glad to be here at tonight's public meeting hosted by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And we do want to acknowledge that we received feedback both from the Yakama Nation and the Columbia River Keeper on concerns about the short notice provided before tonight's meeting. And I know those were addressed in the introductory remarks by the Corps. And we understand and take those concerns really seriously, and we have conveyed those to the Corps. And we want to sincerely thank all of you as well for being here this evening and sharing your valuable time and energy in this space. And although, just to clarify a few things before Helen and Rich give a quick intro, that although the Army Corps will still be the federal agency responsible, or we say lead agency, responsible for the cleanup process at Bradford Island, and that includes community involvement. Now that Bradford Island is listed as a Superfund site on EPA's national priorities list, EPA will have a more formal role of overseeing the cleanup work. And in the future, EPA and the Army Corps will have something that we call, and I'm sure a lot of you on the meeting site might be familiar with, called a Federal Facilities Agreement, or FFA for short. And you'll be hearing that, I'm sure, tonight and a lot in the future. And that FFA provides an agreed upon framework for EPA concurrence on key documents in the Superfund process. And it also, that FFA has an enforceable schedule so that the project can stay on track. And EPA and the Corps are starting to negotiate this FFA now. And this Bradford Island cleanup will be done consistent with EPA's Superfund guidance and standards. And we're really looking forward to listening to the information that the Army Corps is providing to everyone this evening, and to also hear the feedback and questions from everyone who is here tonight. And in our many years of working on Superfund sites, EPA recognizes the critical importance of community involvement in the cleanup process. And we look forward to working with the Army Corps as we move forward. So I'd like to give now just a quick moment to Helen and Rich. Helen, just a quick minute to introduce yourself, and then Rich. So Helen, if you want to go first.
Sure. Thanks for that, Laura, very much. Hi, everyone. I'm Helen Bocher, and I'm one of the 2 EPA project managers on this site. I've been a project manager with EPA for 13 years now, and I work out of our Seattle office. Rich?
Hi, everyone. Rich Francis. I started working for EPA around 2013 in RCRA and TSCA enforcement. I joined Superfund in 2016, doing federal facility oversight in California mostly. I joined Region 10 in 2020 as part of the Portland Harbor Superfund site team, and I am the second RPM at Bradford Island.
Thanks so much, Rich and Helen. And now I'll transition back to you, Linda, and the Army Corps, so that you may continue with this evening's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rich, Laura, and Helen. We look forward to this. Real quick, I have, while we're doing this, another poll. I like polls. So obviously, we are very much appreciative of you guys providing this feedback. This next session on the background of Bradford Island will be provided by Dan Carlson. So Dan, give me just a moment, and we'll let you roll forward with that. Thanks. Take it away, Dan.
Thanks, Linda. Yes, so just to give some background for Bradford Island and the project, well, just to talk some first about the Bonneville Dam Complex, which you can see an image of part of the complex here. And if you want to go to the next slide, Linda. So this is an aerial of the Bonneville Dam Complex. Bradford Island is part of that. And Bradford Island, it's located in the complex. It's located in the Columbia River at river mile 146.1, and that's approximately 40 miles east of Portland, Oregon. And you can see the different parts of the complex labeled on this aerial photo, where you can see Robbins Island is on the Oregon side here. In the center, there's Bradford Island. Cascade Island is to the north on the Washington side of the river. And included in this is the navigation channel, which ships navigate through. There's powerhouses 1 and 2, which are used to generate power for the dam. And then there's the spillway in the middle there that's used for overflow of water. And if you want to go to the next slide. The next slide is to talk through some of the timeline for the Bradford Island site. And really it starts with when the Bonneville Dam was constructed, and that was completed in 1938. In the 1940s, there were 20 homes built on the island, and there was a landfill created for disposal of both household waste and project-related waste associated with the dam. In the 50s, the landfill was being used. There was also a pistol range and sandblast area, which are two other. Sorry, did I hear some reverb or did someone say my name? Sorry, thought I heard something. So there was a couple industrial activities that were taking place in addition to the landfill. So that included the pistol range and the sandblast area. That was in the 1950s. And also during that time, there was disposal of some equipment in the river. In the 1960s, those areas continued to be under use. So the landfill, pistol range, and the sandblast area. In the 70s, the pistol range stopped being in use. The landfill and the sandblast area were still underway at that time. And if you want to advance to the next slide. So in the 80s is when the landfill closed. At that time, the sandblast area was still in use. And it was really in the 90s when investigations began for the site for contamination. And that started in 1997 with the landfill. And as part of that, there was the discovery of various waste disposal and industrial releases on Bradford Island. And that included the discovery in the year 2000 of electrical equipment that was on the bottom of the Columbia River adjacent to Bradford Island. And so shortly after that contamination was discovered, there was a series of sampling events that began to characterize contamination in the soil, water, river sediment, and different species that were living in the river, including clams and smallmouth bass. In the 2000s, there were 2 removal actions in the river, and they included the removal of the electrical equipment that was found in the river, as well as sediment that was in the river. In the 2010s, there was the completion of the remedial investigation. Risk assessments were completed, and additional sampling was completed. And since that time, in recent years, in the 2020s, there's been ongoing sampling for fish tissue, groundwater, soil sampling. Cleanup options are being determined for the island and the river. So those next steps are being taken as those cleanup options are being determined. And the most recent development would be with the site being listed on the National Priorities List, or the NPL, which was on March 16th, 2022. And so the next few slides will cover the CERCLA process and work that's been done to date. And so CERCLA, that stands for the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act. And the site's been managed under CERCLA since 2004. This is the same set of regulations that Superfund sites listed on the NPL are managed under, and the site's going to continue to go down this process now that it's listed. If you want to go to the next slide. And so on this slide, this diagram just shows the CERCLA process. It's a thorough process with distinct steps, and it's helpful to understand what the next steps are going to be for cleanup to review this process from the beginning. And so to start, in short, it starts with determining first if there is contamination, and then completing a series of investigations to define the nature and extent of that contamination, determining if what the risk is to human health and the environment, determining feasible cleanup options, getting public input on those cleanup options, and then selecting a cleanup remedy, completing that remedy, and then performing long-term monitoring as long as it's needed after the remedy is complete. And so for Bradford Island, the remedial investigation was completed in 2012, and there was 2 operable units that were identified as part of that, which we'll go into more detail a little later. And they included the River OU and the Upland OU, or operable unit. And so both of those OUs had baseline risk assessments completed in 2016. And you can see on the diagram for both the river and the Upland OU, they're currently at different parts in the process of the feasibility study stage right now for determining those cleanup options. And if you want to advance to the next slide. And this figure just shows those two operable units, the upland in the gold and the river in the blue. And the upland OU, it just consists of that part of Bradford Island that's east of the spillway as part of the dam. And this is really the part of the island where it had those different industrial and waste disposal activities take place. The river OU, it's located basically everything upstream of the Bonneville Dam, including the forebay, both north and south of Bradford Island, and everything upriver just a little past another small island called Goose Island. And so this whole area here, again, it's just upstream of the dam. And so it's comprised of everything upstream, including the navigation channel, the locks, the first and second powerhouse, and the spillway. So everything behind there from the Oregon to the Washington shoreline. And this area was chosen at the time. It covers some areas where contamination was either observed or thought to be potentially anticipated. And if you want to advance to the next slide. This slide is a close-up aerial of the operable unit. And included as part of it, there's 4 AOPCs, or areas of potential concern. So these are really 4 specific areas that were identified for contamination that were associated with past activities at the site. And so you can see the landfill AOPC is displayed in gold on the northeast end of the island. There was both household waste and project-related waste, and they were disposed in those series of pits there in the landfill. And there was the Pistol Range AOPC that's displayed in purple on the south end of the island. And this area was historically used for small arms target practice. The Sandblast area AOPC, it's displayed in red, that larger area there in the figure. And this used to contain a building where sandblast activities took place. And they used to also have chemicals in an above ground storage tank in this area, among some other activities. The Bulb Slope AOPC, it's displayed in green, a smaller area on the northern slope of the island there. And this area contained glass and electrical light bulb debris that was disposed on this area of the slope. If you want to go to the next slide. And so as part of the remedial investigation that was completed for the site, there was contamination that was identified in the upland OU on the island. And this included metals and organic contaminants like PCBs and pesticides. And that contamination was evaluated in soil and groundwater and surface water. The contamination in the river OU, it's primarily from PCBs, and those have been detected at elevated concentrations in sediment, clams, crayfish, and fish. And you can go to the next slide. The next couple slides will talk about some of the cleanup actions that have been performed so far to date for the site. And on this image here, you can see part of one of those actions where the electrical debris was removed from the northeastern shore of Bradford Island. And we'll show some more on that on the next slide if you want to advance. And so you can see in here on this slide that removal took place in 2002. There were 3 piles that contained this contamination, which you can see on the figure there. And in total, there was 32 tons of solid waste that was removed. This included any debris that was identified within the river as part of the piles, and also debris that was on the slopes of Bradford Island that was immediately upland of the piles, which in that case, upland, it consisted mostly of wire rope. And for that debris that was removed, there was a total of 4 55-gallon drums worth of the PCB containing electrical debris that was removed as part of that. And you can see what some of that looks like in those images on the top right here on the slide. And in addition to removing the debris in the river, they also removed any sediment that was around the debris. And as part of that, there was a total of 7 55-gallon drums worth of that sediment that was removed as well. And during these removals, there was intensive dive surveys that were completed as well. That was both before and after the removals. So that was done to ensure that they found all the debris and that it was all removed as well. And you can go to the next slide. So the next removal action that took place was in 2007, and that was hydraulic dredging that took place, and more than 60 tons of contaminated sediment was removed using this diver-assisted hydraulic dredging at the time. And you can see on the figure, those areas included the debris pile areas, mainly removal area 1 and 3. Removal area 2 was also included. These areas were selected not just based on where the debris piles were, but they were selected based on sediment sampling that took place after the removals for areas of contaminated sediment. And you can go to the next slide. And just to talk about some of the additional investigations that have been taking place since the remedial investigation was completed. There's been ongoing sampling and data being collected to fill data gaps in both the upland and the river OUs. And that data is being used to develop remedial alternatives for cleaning up the contamination. And as part of that recent data collection, the Army Corps has recently collected and is analyzing stormwater, soil, and groundwater data from the upland. And we're in the process of completing a series of smallmouth bass sampling and tracking studies for the river. And we also collected additional crayfish and clam samples. And we're also going to be collecting additional sediment samples from the river as well. And that is it for me. And I think I will pass it back to the Balcom team.
Thanks, Dan. I'd like this opportunity to introduce Shelley Wilson. Shelley is with Longnecker and Associates, a member of the Balcom team, and she's going to review community involvement.
Thank you, Linda. So again, I'm Shelley Wilson, and I've had over 30 years of experience with the environmental cleanup and also with community involvement. So thanks so much for joining tonight. And I just would like to go over this extremely important aspect of the cleanup process, community involvement. So next slide, please. So there are multiple ways that the Corps will engage the public and multiple ways for you all to be involved. So there will be updates to the Army Corps website and social media when new information is available. There will also be public meetings to review progress. And depending upon your interest, which is one thing we're asking tonight, there's also possible creation and support of a community advisory group. So next slide, please. So what is a community advisory group? It's a group that's composed of interested parties. So that could be anyone in the community that's interested, tribes, other stakeholders that might be affected by this site. And the key thing is that it's a forum for community, the interested parties in the community to engage and share ideas. So it's a place to hear the broad range of views and perspectives of all the interested parties. It's a focal point for two-way exchange of information between interested parties and the Army Corps, EPA, and also for members of the community advisory group itself to talk to each other. So it's, again, a forum for all the interested parties to talk about their needs and concerns related to the cleanup process. So next slide, please. So what the CAG is not. Community advisory groups are not actual decision-making bodies. The Army Corps and EPA are both responsible for final remedial decisions at this site. However, the CAG, though, through the input of the interested parties, the CAG plays a key role in contributing to more informed and better decisions in the cleanup process. So next slide, please. So why are the CAGs important? Again, it's a central forum for hearing and voicing all of those concerns and ideas. The CAG serves to strengthen the voice of interested parties. So again, it's a very important forum for that two-way communication. And I'll also note that the effectiveness of a community advisory group depends very much on how well it's set up in the initial stages. Next slide, please. So what is the role of the community advisory group? So again, it's a central forum for the exchange of information and encourages the CAG members to discuss site issues and activities amongst themselves. It also helps to develop a better understanding of the views throughout the community and interested parties. It's a great way for interested parties to offer input and feedback to the Army Corps and to EPA on the site decision-making. And it also serves as a forum for collaboration with the Corps in terms of the cleanup process. Next slide, please. So here's the key question. We're looking for your interest in community advisory group formation. So the Balcom team will be in the area conducting interviews with interested parties. And through those interviews, the Balcom team will help to gauge the interest in the formation of a community advisory group. So the Balcom team will be developing a report for the Army Corps. And based on what the Balcom team hears from those interviews and from public comments received tonight, then that report will provide a recommendation to the Army Corps. Just again, if there's enough interest in formation of a CAG, then perhaps a recommendation for formation. So if you are interested in being interviewed or even being considered for the community advisory group membership, then we would love for you to send a comment indicating your interest to the email that you see there on the screen. So I'll turn it over now to Chris Badai.
So I'm launching yet another poll. So let's see if I got that started. Forgive me. There we go. Yeah. So we've got the question regarding community advisory group. So again, thank you for your participation in this. We appreciate this. Okay. Chris, thank you. Next step.
Great. Can you hear me okay? Can you advance the slide? There you go. Okay, thank you. The next steps. Well, we've already heard a lot of what the next steps are, a lot about that. Dan talked about what we're doing technically, and we continue to fill data gaps and collect information to help inform our decision-making on a remedial alternative for cleanup. And so that's ongoing both in the river and the upland. And all of that information will be shared with the public through the proposed plan for remediation. The community involvement piece is what we're addressing tonight. That's a big next step for us. And our contractor, Linda, thank you very much for running this meeting and for setting this up. It's very important to get feedback from the public, which is why they're setting up an opportunity to conduct interviews with all interested parties and to update our community involvement plan. And they'll be helping us set up more regular public meetings. And so this is just the first of many meetings that we'll be having. And future meetings, hopefully we'll have more technical information if that's what you're interested in finding out. And I believe that kind of information would probably be covered more appropriately in a CAG meeting if a CAG is formed for this project and there's enough community involvement to conduct those CAG meetings. And again, those are run by the community, and you set the agenda, and the Corps would provide information at those meetings as requested from the CAG. And as we reach certain milestones in the circle process, we'll want to present to the TAG our findings and so forth, and get feedback to inform future decisions. Along with the technical work we're doing and the community involvement, the folks from EPA mentioned the federal facility agreement needs to be negotiated. And so that's really front and foremost for us right now, is to work out that federal facility agreement with EPA. And we're just starting that process because that started after the site was listed on March 16th. And so I would encourage everybody to provide your feedback and to sign up for the community involvement piece through interviews or asking to be interviewed for membership on the CAG. And our contractor will provide all of that information for you and links of how to contact them. And I want to thank you again for joining this meeting today. This is a very important piece of the circle process, is to make sure the public is engaged in what we're doing and understands what we're doing and why. Okay, thank you, Linda.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate this. Okay. John.
I think John
Hi,
is
Linda, how
having
are you? I am
good.
having some
Oh,
technical
good.
difficulties. Yes, please, Linda. So I'll turn this back over to you. If you have some questions that you'd like to present to the panel, I appreciate it. Thank you.
That's great. Okay, so everybody, welcome to the question and answer portion of our meeting tonight. We've got a bunch of questions that have been typed into our Q&A. I show that there's 9 of them. I suspect that some have been answered. So if it's okay for everybody, I'm going to read the questions that have been answered so that everybody who's participating can hear what's already been addressed in the event that that's a question that you already have. So questions that have been answered. So the first question we've got was, when will the tribes or other members of the community be able to participate in technical discussions or review technical documents? Okay, so Craig Johnson, who's the tribal liaison with the Corps, provided the following answer. Actually, Craig, are you available, or did you get audio back? Do you want to answer? Okay, Craig, I'm going to try and answer on your behalf, but you are welcome to clarify this. Okay, so public meetings and the community advisory groups will be a great way for all parties to provide input to the Corps as we continue through the circle process. The format for these meetings will be developed depending upon your input. They may involve general or technical, and the Corps will support tribal involvement through both the community involvement process and, as requested, government-to-government consultation. If you're interested in participating in future public or CAG meetings, please provide your contact information and any input to Balcom Environmental. And again, you can always do that through the email address, Bradford Island Public Comment Input at usace.army.mil, and we'll get that information. Okay, so the next question is, when will the site be cleaned up? Chris, do you want to respond to this?
Sorry, had to unmute myself. Yes, the site the work is ongoing and has been ongoing all these years. So we are progressing along the lines of the CERCLA process, and we will follow that process until we get to a final cleanup remedy. And so the the Corps will be looking at the data we're collecting and interpreting that and developing remedial alternatives. And all of this goes into the feasibility study that we'll put out there for public comment. And then ultimately we select a remedy for cleanup, and we'll work with EPA on that to make sure they concur with what we're selecting. And the federal facility agreement I mentioned, it has a dispute resolution. So ultimately EPA and the Corps will come together on what that final remedy would be for cleanup. And so that process takes time. It's a linear process. It requires public engagement. For example, when we put the selected remedy out for public comment, that's a 30-day review period by the public to comment on the selected remedy. And so we're working towards developing the cleanup alternatives and ultimately getting that proposed plan out there for both the river and the upland operable units in the CERCLA process. So the federal facility agreement, as EPA mentioned, will have a site management plan associated with it that kind of lays out that CERCLA process, and we'll have a schedule, but it will be somewhat flexible. It will be year to year, because it does depend on how much work gets done in one year and then what the next steps are for the following year, because the Corps is congressionally funded for this project, and it depends on what our funding is in order to make progress on that CERCLA process. So that's a very long answer to say that it takes time to go through the CERCLA process and get to the point where you can start designing the remediation and doing the remedial action itself.
Great, thank you for that comprehensive answer, Chris. Another question that was already answered, but I want to be sure and make everybody has this. Actually, Autumn, if you don't mind, if you progress to the next slide, it's very relevant. It says, when will these slides be posted on the web? And the answer is we should have these posted. This presentation will be posted here in a couple of days. But there is, of course, a lot of information. And so all of these additional information tabs here for the website, the public comment inbox, the administrative record, and of course our social media for updates about new and upcoming opportunities for information or documents, etc., are all there. Okay, so let's go to the next question I've got here at the top of the list for the open questions. Says, how do I join the community advisory group? Excellent question. Again, please send your interest and responses to the public comment inbox, the mailbox, Bradford Island public comment .usace.army.mil. We look forward to hearing from you. Okay, the next question is, when is the next meeting? That's a great question. Who wants to answer that one? John, is that a you question or is that a Chris question?
I can take a stab at it. This is
Chris.
We don't have the next meeting on the calendar yet, but I can assure you that we heard loud and clear the public wants more advanced notice before we have the next public meeting. So we will strive to provide a 30-day or so notice of our next public meeting. I think what we need to do is our contractor is trying to set up interviews with the public and understand the public interest in this project and what the public wants, how they want to interact with us on this project. And we'll take that feedback from you and use that to shape how often we think you want to engage with us, how often you want to hear about the project, as well as is there interest in standing up a CAG? And I would suspect if there is interest that the CAG meetings would happen a little more frequently than say the overall general public meetings. But we need to sort all that out. And the first step is getting feedback from the public. And that's the purpose of today's meeting, is to tell the public that we're looking for your feedback and how you can provide that. So then we can lay out what those next meetings look like and when they would happen.
That is, okay. Next question. What is different now that the site is an NPL site? That would be that actually, that might actually be a two-part answer. Who wants to take that one on?
I'll start, and if someone from EPA wants to respond also, that's fine. But from the Corps' perspective, what we see has changed is that EPA is now the lead regulator on the site, and it requires that a federal facility agreement be negotiated and entered into between our agencies. And so that's the big change for us, is to pivot and enter into this agreement with EPA and work with them as the lead regulator. Previously, we'd been working with the state of Oregon, DEQ, as the regulator on this site. So to me, that's what's changed. We're still the lead agency conducting the investigation and putting together the documents and following that circular process. We'll just be working more closely with EPA on that process. Over.
Hey, Chris, thanks for that. This is Helen Bocher from EPA. And I would just add that from our perspective, the key changes that come with NPL listing are through that federal facilities agreement we've been talking about. There will be a specific list of documents on which EPA concurrence is required. So that gives EPA a much bigger say in the outcome. It also will include an enforceable schedule. And ultimately, if EPA and the Corps are unable to agree on the final cleanup, the EPA administrator will have the final say on what the cleanup measures will be. So those are important changes, and that those all came about as a result of the NPL listing.
That is great. Thank you, Helen. Any further comments on that? Okay. So the next question is, how soon will this get started?
I can answer that, and I think really Chris and Helen have really answered that already, so I'll keep it kind of short. But really, the work has already started for the project, and it's ongoing. The remedial investigation was completed, and we're in that process of right now collecting additional data and evaluating remedial alternatives, and we're going through that feasibility study process. There isn't a date set yet for the cleanup actions themselves, but those next steps include to continue to collect data, evaluate remedial alternatives, and then as Chris and Helen have talked about in more detail, is completing that Federal Facilities Agreement, or FFA, before moving forward and further on that end of things.
That's great. Thank you, Dan. Okay. The Corps is running the community process and making the decisions. How can we be sure our input will be considered? So I think there's several of us that we can answer on that one. So Chris, go ahead.
We're facilitating the community process, but my understanding is the CAG is community run and they set the agenda and discussion topics. We provide information, we'll report to the CAG on subjects that they ask information for or that we're ready to report on. But it's not a core-led effort, that the CAG meetings, it's a community-led effort. And Linda, you can chime in here since you're trying to put together the community involvement plan and the CAG for us. So go ahead.
Sure. And I honestly, I don't think I can do a better job than you just, but that is actually the entire purpose of the community advisory group. They have a very important advisory role to EPA and the Corps as part of this process. And the CAG meetings will identify issues to be brought to make certain that information is considered as part of the process. So so this is the advertising here for it's so important for everybody to consider involvement as part of the community advisory group. So that was my plug for the day. So okay. This is, I think, part of a part 2, but it has more of a technical bend to it. But it is the Corps going to make any changes to the cleanup based on our input? How do we actually fit into the process? So again, I think that might be 2-part. It would be, I would really like to hear both from the Corps and EPA on that.
Helen, go ahead.
Chris, do you want to go first? Okay.
Oh, I'll go ahead. Yeah. So one component of the CERCLA process, and when we go through the feasibility study to formulate our alternatives and to evaluate our alternatives, one of the criteria that we have to use to evaluate an alternative is tribal acceptance, state acceptance, as well as community acceptance of each individual alternative. And so part of this process is going to be to listen to the public, hear what your feedback is on how we are proposing to remediate the site. And then we have to consider that in making our selection. And it's a criteria that factors into which cleanup alternative we ultimately select. So it's an intrinsic part of the CERCLA process.
Well, thank you, Kristen, for that answer. This is Helen from EPA, and that's exactly what I was going to point to as well, that public involvement is a required part of the CERCLA decision process. It's not a nice to have. It's not something we do just because we feel like it. It's required by the law and our guidance. And so it's something we do take very seriously. And we will look forward to working with the Corps and building the outreach for the community so that we can get as many people and different voices involved in informing our decisions.
And can I just add a little bit to that? I think, there are several different pathways for input, and certainly what we're talking about today with the public meetings, which hopefully in the future there'll be some additional, more technical content, more discourse, and then the CAG. But then as part of the process, as Kristen was saying, once there are some proposed remedies, there's the proposed plan that is released to the public. And at that point, public comment is taken and has to be addressed in a responsiveness summary as part of the record of decision. So that is definitely a formalized part of the process where the public's input has to be addressed under CERCLA.
And Bill, this is Helen. I want to add on to this that it's not just EPA and the Corps. There are important roles for our state agency regulatory partners and other government entities who have a say in this cleanup. And that includes agencies like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or NOAA, which manages anadromous fish on behalf of the federal government. So those agencies are also going to have a say in this process as well.
That's great. Thank you. Everybody, thank you so much. We have more questions. We have a copy of these. We've got an opportunity to try and provide you some answers. Please, if you get an opportunity, submit these questions to the inbox for the USACE website. One last time, Bradford Island public comment inbox at usace.army.mil. We want to make certain that we get information out to everyone about this process. So with that, thank you so much for your participation. I'd like to thank my panelists here from both the Corps and from EPA for your time and your talent. We appreciate this, and we look forward to a lot more dialogue as we move forward for this process. So John, Chris, anybody want to comments?
I have a couple things. I just want to reassure folks that the Corps takes this very seriously. We do recognize there's contamination out there and we need to clean up the site. The primary path of the contaminants would be through eating fish. And I understand there's concern with the fish advisory out there, and some people might not be aware of that. So we have posted signs on our property where legally we can. We got permission to post signs at boat ramps and other fishing access points along the river, within the area of the fish advisory. And I just want to let you know that we've tried to get the word out. There's a link to the Oregon Health Authority fish advisory on our website, and they're on the notices we placed all along the river. So we are trying to get the word out, and we would appreciate it if you folks spread the word so that people are aware that the resident fish, the salmon and steelhead, they're migratory, they're okay. It's just the resident fish like bass that are caught in the area of Bradford Island are not safe to eat. And so you need to communicate that information to the public as much as we can and as broadly as we can, so no one gets hurt by that. And we are committed to getting that site cleaned up as soon as we can. Again, we have to follow the process and get everything lined up in order to do that. And we are continuing to work toward that end. Okay, thank you. Thank you for joining us, everybody.
Thanks so much. Thanks. Take care, everyone.
Hey, I think we have a few more questions actually in the chat. Did we want to go through some more of the Q&A here? I
am happy to stay. If you want to, we can continue the chat if the participations want to be a part of that. Looks like we've still got a lot of people still on the line. I am happy to continue this as long as Corps and EPA have their schedules available.
Linda, I think we were scheduled to be here until 7.
Yeah, we're here. Let's continue and see if we can answer the public's questions.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. Sorry, we have at least another full half hour. I've got my time zones mixed up. Apologies. Okay. So, so here's the next question. What is the target date for remedy implementation?
This is Kristen. I can take that one. So right now we're in what the CERCLA phase would be is just the feasibility study process. And so after that, we issue a proposed plan and then a record of decision. And then the cleanup will be designed and constructed after the record of decision is issued. As I think Helen alluded to, as part of the federal facilities agreement, there will be a schedule that's developed between the Corps and EPA. And so we don't have a specific date for remedy implementation outlined for the island or the river. That will get finalized as the federal facilities agreement is negotiated and a target date is established there. So more to come, but right now we're in the feasibility phase.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, so our next question is, are there PCBs making it through the dam?
This is Kristen. I can actually take that one as well. So yeah, the Bradford Island, the northern shoreline of the island is right behind the spillway. And so there is connectivity between that forebay of the dam as well as downstream. And so during the remedial investigation phase of the study, the Corps did go downstream and take some sediment samples to look for contaminants related to the Bradford Island site. PCBs were detected. PCBs are one of the main contaminants that are attributed to Bradford Island, but they weren't detected at concentrations that were of risk to human health or the environment.
And Kristen, this is Bill. I just might add on to that there are fishing advisories, fish consumption advisories issued by the state of Oregon and the state of Washington for a good portion of the Columbia River, what's called the middle reach of the Columbia River, which goes up to Mary Dam and down to the Bonneville Dam. And some of that is associated with the site itself, and then some of that is associated with other sources of contamination in the system. So that's also something to be aware of, is that while we may not have found contamination above risk levels under CERCLA, for this project, there are other things going on in the system to be aware of related to fishing and fish consumption.
Thanks, Bill. So the next question I have here is, what do you see the roles are for the state of Washington and the state of Oregon?
So I'll attempt that. They are still very much involved. We've been working with them closely all along. The federal facility agreement that is being negotiated between EPA and the Corps, my understanding is that both states want to be signatories to that FFA, so they'll be included in those negotiations and discussions, is my understanding. So they have a big role to play.
Yeah, I agree. And I would just add, this is Helen from EPA, that the states have particular laws that are passed under state laws that may be applicable to the cleanup. And so one very important role for the state agencies is to help EPA and the Corps understand and properly apply applicable state regulations to the cleanup.
Thank you, Helen. What is the target date for remedy implementation?
So that's the one I just answered, that we still need to get that worked out through the federal facilities agreement.
A lot of interest in that. The next question is there oversight review for conclusions reached by the Corps or EPA?
This is Kristen. Ultimately, as we mentioned earlier, the state of Oregon and the state of Washington will be involved and be signatories to the FFA. We do have to acknowledge their acceptance and support for a remedy. And then we also have to acknowledge the community, public, and stakeholders' acceptance during the comments on the proposed plan. And so, USACE will choose the remedy, but we do have to get concurrence and final approval from the EPA. As Helen mentioned, the EPA administrator essentially has final say. So it'll be a collaborative process with both the Corps and EPA making final decisions.
Thanks, Kristen. The next question is, what constitutes community acceptance? that's a bit vague.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think community acceptance, the way we look at that is, the degree to which the community either shows their support for a particular cleanup action or not. Typically during the feasibility study, a range of alternatives will be recommended, and some of those alternatives could have more action than others to do cleanup. Some of them could rely on institutional controls like fish advisories or various restrictions. And so what we look at is, what is the community's support for things like that? A lot of times communities want to see more physical cleanup and disposal of contamination. A lot of times, fishing advisories may not align with various community practices for people who rely more heavily on fish consumption in the area. And so we try and listen to those types of input to get community support to gauge what is a remedy that is in the best interest of the public.
The next question is, how dependent is the cleanup process on congressional approval if they are approving funding?
This is Chris, and I'll take that one. The funding process for the project is complicated, and we have to submit budgets 2 years in advance. So we have to anticipate what's going to happen in the next 2 years from now and put a justification together of why we're requesting X amount of dollars and what we plan to do with that. So that needs to be documented in the federal facility agreement, for one thing, in order to make any commitments on a schedule. It's all funding dependent. And I might add that this work is 50% funded by congressional appropriations and 50% funded from BPA. So we have to coordinate with BPA for their share of the funding, and as well as go through the federal budget cycle to request that funding. And so it's not so much that Congress is, quote, approving our work so much as understanding what it is we need to do and what the next steps are and what will that cost. And they rely on us to inform them about that. But we're always subject to what's going on in Congress and what they are allocating funding for, depending on what's going on nationwide. So there's always that little bit of uncertainty in the funding, but I can assure you this project has a lot of attention with the recent listing of the site. But I can't make any commitments for Congress. Nobody can. So the best we can do is inform the decision makers on the budget as best we can of what's needed, why, and help to keep the project going forward each year with the funding requests.
That's great. Thank you, Chris. Okay, next question. What authority will tribes have regarding the remedy? Will this include the right to review technical documents and discuss with the Corps and EPA?
And I can take that. Hopefully you can hear me now. Can you hear me okay? Great. Well, actually, the tribes, there is no authority from the tribe side. It's actually a part of the tribal trust that we have for the federal government. The federal government has trust to the tribes to inform them and meet at a government-to-government level if the tribes do choose so to do that. Including the right to review technical documents and discuss use and EPA. Yes, we will do all of that in a government-to-government consultation basis. If However, if the CAG information is not relayed in a way that the tribes would like to get additional information, that's why we have the government to government consultation in. And that is mainly the main authority, I guess, if you will, if the tribes have to meet with the government, and we have that obligation. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Well, and since, and apologies to everybody on the phone, since I clearly misstepped and don't know how to read my clock. So we still have the floor open. We have 15 more minutes left. So we will be delighted to hang on. And if you have additional questions, please post them in the Q&A box. We would love to hear from you. Well, while I still have participants, I would love to ask where you get your information sources. And last but not least, I've got one last poll that I would like to ask. Which is, what types of information in terms of what you would like to hear? Schedule progress, contamination found, opportunities for public involvement, proposed regulatory decisions, and all of the above. We do have another question. The question is, how far downstream is the fish contaminated?
The fish advisory for Bradford Island is from the dam upstream, not downstream. So it extends from Bonneville Dam, I think, up to Ruckles Creek. I'm not aware of a fish advisory downstream of Bonneville. There's another fish advisory from our fish advisory endpoint up to farther upstream, McNary Dam or something, which is a separate fish advisory. But I'm not aware of a fish advisory for downstream of the dam. I could be wrong. And if somebody knows, go ahead and let us know.
Yeah, the Oregon Health Authority has a fish advisory for resident fish for, as you said, for our project from 1 mile upstream from the Bonneville Dam for PCBs. But then there is this Middle Columbia River fish advisory, which goes from Bonneville Dam up to McNary Dam. And that, I believe, is for PCBs and mercury. And again, it's for resident fish. The best thing to do, though, is to check the Oregon Health Authority. They're the ones who are actually issuing health advisories, the fish advisories. So the Oregon Health Authority website, and I don't know if the Washington Department of Health has fish advisories on their website as well for this portion of the Columbia River, but that's another place to go. And I believe we have that link. Dan, didn't we have that link put on our website for people to access the health advisories?
Yeah, I know John was putting that on our website, and I'm not sure if that external link is
Not
there
there
yet.
yet.
Okay, but that should be up on our website in the near future.
And Bill,
sturgeon are included. I see the question there as a as a one of the fish that's included in the advisory.
Yeah, the advisory, so for resident fish, you know, we have resident fish and migratory fish, but the Oregon Health Authority, for their fish consumption guidelines, that includes bass, bluegill, carp, catfish, crappie, suckers, sturgeon, walleye, and yellow perch. So those are some examples of the types of fish that are not safe to eat, that have you know, consumption advisories against them. And I can see Teresa Michelson has a comment. Lack of fish consumption advisory does not mean that there are no contamination of fish or that it's not harmful to the fish. And that's absolutely correct. So the Oregon Health Authority is advising on, you know, consumption rates and things like that for the general public. However, you know, the various fish species, it ranges, will have, you know, impacts from Bradford Island and can travel several miles upstream and downstream. And so it does vary. And then they can also have impacts to the fish themselves and not just to the humans who eat them. That's correct.
Linda, I was wondering, you know, at this point, if you wanted to maybe reiterate that you'll be doing public interviews, and that, and then ways for folks to indicate interest in either being interviewed or participating in the CAG.
Thank you. That's a lovely opportunity to share that again. If you are interested in getting information about the site, information about the community advisory group, information about being interviewed as part of the community involvement process, again, the link for the website is here on this last slide. And again, it's the Bradford Island public comment inbox at usace.army.mil. If you provide your information there about your interest in the community advisory group and being interviewed as part of this process, that information will absolutely get to me. And I look forward to receiving those comments and reaching out to the community. We still have some time.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I saw one more question in the chat here. I thought I would just start an answer to that for how far down or upstream contaminants have been tested and found. And I know during the remedial investigation, there was sampling pretty far downstream. I don't know off the top of my head where that exactly extended to, if others on the call might know. And I know upstream sampling has gone up pretty far as well, to Cascade Locks. And as part of the downstream sampling, I know during the RI, when they did that, they did determine that the concentrations present weren't at a level that was at risk to human health or the environment. So that I know that sampling was done in the past farther downstream of the dam.
And just to elaborate a little bit regarding upstream. So for the sampling that we've done associated with our site, which has included smallmouth bass, sculpin, crayfish, and clams, we've worked in the Bradford Island pool area, and then some of the local areas, Goose Island and up near towards the Bridge of the Gods. So in that pool. But then we've also sampled tissues as high as Dan said, Cascade Locks and a little bit north of Cascade Locks, or upstream of Cascade Locks. And in that area, the contaminant concentrations are notably lower and below risk levels. And we start for us, and as we look upstream, you know, we start to possibly get into other sources as well. And so we have to be careful where we go when we look upstream. Now, there have been other studies, if you go further upstream, unrelated to our project that have looked at contamination, and I'm less familiar with that information. But as far as the work that we've been doing, we see the contamination and the elevated levels in the tissues primarily associated with the Bonneville pool area.
Thanks, Bill. How long will we be doing interviews? We're hoping to start those in the very near future. And the answer is depends upon, of course, the interest, but we would like to obviously talk with as many people who want to be interviewed. So we don't have necessarily a drop dead date on that. We want to encourage public participation as part of this process.
Linda, when we decide on a final date for going, in person, doing in-person interviews, do you have a sense of how that folks will be notified by that? Aside from perhaps on our website.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, of course, that will depend upon how people want to be contacted. So we would like to offer a variety of different ways, depending upon, of course, existing circumstances with COVID, as well as people's personal preference. So we are happy to do in-person interviews. We are happy to do interviews over the telephone, or if we want something a little more interactive, we're happy to do those live via Zoom. So we're hoping to offer a lot of opportunities for dialogue that, depending upon what's happening from a health standpoint, that everybody should have an opportunity to be able to participate, to be able to ask these questions and reach out to us. But we are hoping to meet with the local community, and we are hoping, obviously, that we're getting some input and interest as part of the inbox tonight, as well as posting this information publicly about that interviews are coming up, and please provide us your contact information. We have more time. We'd like to hear from you.
Sounds like it might be time to wrap things up and have some closing statements. So I'll start with just thanking everybody for joining us tonight, and I really appreciate your taking the time to sign in and participate in this public meeting. And again, this will be the first of many more to come. And I would really encourage you to give us your feedback through any of the methods shown on the screen, and to set up an interview with our contractor so we can get some more in-depth feedback from you. And I don't know if Liza Wells would like to conclude our meeting with a final closing statement or not.
Sure, Chris, this was Liza. I'll just say thank you again to everybody for joining us tonight, and thank you to the teams for answering the questions from the attendees. Really appreciate everybody being here tonight and look forward to working together more. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, and our folks from the EPA, do you have any closing comments you'd like to make before we close off?
I don't think so, Chris. I would just echo your thanks to all the folks who were able to join us on short notice. We really do appreciate your input.
Great. Thank you, Helen. Okay, and I look forward to working with my colleagues at EPA and DEQ and Washington DOE. We'll hammer out that federal facility agreement, lickety split, right? Okay, thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate everybody's time. Take care.